Hello, everyone. Welcome to eBizChat, where it is all about business. I'm Rick Zanotti, and I'm joined today by my good friend and co-host, Dr. Susan Nash. How you doing, Susan?
Great. Lots of interesting things going on in the world today.
And scary.
Yes.
Joining us in studio, we've got Harold Muliati. He's our video producer, but he's also going to be co-hosting with us as well. And lots of stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about possible cities of the future, which are being built right now. One of them is by Toyota. We're going to continue our talk on what we talked about travel last time. Let's talk about the travel industry and where that's going. That's going to be real interesting too, and how that applies to tourism nationwide, not nationwide, worldwide, and some other stuff as it comes up. Here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks. Well, we are back, and we got some interesting comments. People really seem to enjoy our last week where we talked a lot about current events and how it affects the economy and everything else. Well, you know, I came across an article yesterday which was on YouTube, which is really quite fascinating. And I'm not sure if you folks are aware of this one yet, but Toyota is building one of many future cities. The one they're building right now is in Japan. It's $10 billion to build it, and it will house many people. It's going to be a whole research facility, living facility. It almost sounds like it might be part of Toyota's future headquarters. There will be lots of robots doing everything like cleaning, like maintenance and other things. Humans, robots. I think, do we have a clip of that or?
I can get that. Yeah, let me.
So we can show a little bit of this.
Oh, I think it's great. And what's interesting too is to see exactly what they decide to include. Because like in the last 10 or 15 years, there are projects in places like Houston called City Central. And anyway, they would try to bring everything together so that you have like a walkable little city area.
Right. And they're talking about a tram system, underground tunnels, everything. The trams go right through the buildings everywhere.
And so
Nice.
we're just going to show a little bit of the start of this video
Right.
here that kind of explains where it is and stuff.
Yeah, so YouTube, don't give us a
Top
copyright.
of Mount Fuji. If you look down, you'll see a futuristic city nestled between the sprawling green tea fields. That's Toyota's $10 billion woven city. It has an innovative basket-like design that's intertwined with 3 types of roads, smart houses, research facilities, and an underground transport system. 360 of Toyota's best inventors live in Woven City, and they are constantly working on new technologies to assist the city's residents. Woven City is years away from becoming a reality, but today, we're giving you a sneak peek. Let's head down for a closer look. It looks...
Well,
And so, yeah.
yeah, and I think it's interesting, but I feel like it's also often being called a smart city. And it's this sort of thing where you hear this a lot from a lot of the big tech companies like Google and stuff, where they want to make these environments and cities and stuff where everything's interconnected as like Internet of Things, like every appliance, every vehicle and stuff like that. I always get a bit. It always makes me a bit. It gives me pause because I feel like isn't this. Especially with companies like Google and stuff like that, I don't know how much Toyota would do it, but I feel like, isn't this a way for the big companies to just have an even easier way to pull all of your information by having everything connected and everything? Like, I have bought a little bit into the whole smart appliance thing. Like, I have a smart washing machine, and it'll tell me when it's done washing my laundry, for example. But I don't tend to do the things like the lights where you can tell it to turn the lights on and off and all that kind of thing. some people are really into that, where they want everything to be voice controlled or controlled from their phone and stuff like that. But it makes me nervous, because I feel like these things, they just end up watching you at some point.
Well, they have the capability to watch you, and they also have the capability to control. For example, I know in California, they're really trying hard to get everyone on the grid with smart thermostats, so they determine how hot, how cold your house should be. That would be interesting. We have a smart thermostat, but we're not on the grid. And I want to put it on the grid. But again, one day it might just go on by itself. They'll say, "Oh no, you know what? We decided to put you on anyway," even though you keep saying no. So this is a little scary. My concern about cities like Woven is, and again, we're only looking at architectural drawings, but it looks very, very sterile. Look what happened. Remember in the 60s when they built Brasilia, the capital of Brazil?
Mm-hmm.
Very modern buildings for its time. Very spacious streets, and no humans walk. It's hot as hell. No humans walk there. And then nobody lives there. They all hated it. Everybody just hated the place. Totally sterile. And so I wonder how much they're taking into account the sterility part of it, and how much people will buy into that. And the key here is buy into it. How many will actually buy anything in those areas? Will they like it? Will they not like it? I don't know. Because like Harold says, as soon as you add the word smart, that means some idiot is watching you. So,
Well, I mean,
that's it. But that is yin and yang. There is balance at the smart and the idiot. It just kind of goes hand in hand.
Well, I mean, I like both of you immediately jump to the dystopian vision of it.
Yeah.
And I think about, just utopian visions gone hideously wrong, like Celebration in Disney, like properties like this model city. But I also think, okay, when I think of smart cities, it doesn't have to be surveillance and individual surveilling and controlling people.
No.
I think it would be a good idea for them to surveil and check the health of the infrastructure. And I'm thinking of Surfside, et cetera. Like if there's a smart cities initiative in different parts of the world that has to do with civil engineering, and it has to do with putting sensors in buildings to get a sense of like, okay, where are there leaks? When can it be dangerous? When are things starting to fail? How can we fix this and do preventive maintenance instead of restoration? So I think maybe there's a possibility of woven cities.
Well, they'll definitely have that component. I remember we did a project about 8 years ago, maybe 9, for a building automation. And this was for a very large pharma company. And they had about 50 structures. And this system controlled everything in the structure. It was great. It controlled the ACs, the heating, the gardening in terms of all of the sprinkler systems. Everything that could be controlled by sensors was controlled. And as a result, maintenance costs dropped dramatically. It was really easy. Many times it would just notify you, we have a problem on sprinkler lawn 6 in building 8. And there you go. And you either had to send somebody or they rerouted it somehow that they could fix it. Not a simple system. There was a lot of stuff to it. But there's a lot of most of these college campuses, or I should say campus-like environments for companies, have those systems. And they already do wonders. So I'm assuming, like you said, these cities and larger cities that are already here will eventually be retrofitted to have things like that to save a ton of money on maintenance costs.
Well, but just the strength of materials.
That's
so I'm
too.
thinking of the structural integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it does make sense. The Toyota City, it does make sense, as you said before, in the context of thinking of it as essentially a larger corporate campus, an equivalent to things like Google's campus or like Behringer City in China, where it's, they have a bunch of their employees living there and the facilities are just within walking distance.
So that's just an interesting thing. Yes, and I guess we did go dystopian because look at the current times. Um, we were talking the other day a lot about travel and your initial travel nightmare, the dystopian travel experience you faced in hotels and everything else. But there's some new data out this week that the whole travel industry is about 80% below where it should be. And they don't foresee any quick signs of that turning around until maybe 2 to 5 years. That's a long time. So chains like Marriott, Hilton, Four Seasons, all of those chains are suffering. They've had to do massive layoffs. They've had to close a lot or sell a lot of their structures, their hotels, the buildings. It's massive, and Susan, you were talking about that early before show. It's worldwide. You had some takes on Haiti with this one.
Yes. Yeah. Well, for example, I don't know how many of you in the audience are aware that yesterday, early in the morning, the president of Haiti, President Moise, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he was assassinated, and his wife was attacked as well. And they've been having, ever since the earthquake 11 years ago, it's been kind of a complete spiral. There hasn't been the kind of recovery that they've needed. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they can't seem to get past strong-arm dictatorships and rampant violence. So the thing is that they've been counting on, places like Haiti, have been counting on, first of all, the maquiladora model, where they used to do a lot of manufacturing for, say, swimwear, things like that. And that went away when you had so much corruption in the docks or in the customs, and then tourism is always held out as the wonderful, great, paradisical, green way to rescue your economy. And it's always looked upon as better than manufacturing, or better than mining or extractive industries. But the problem is, and this is almost like a resource curse issue too, that it becomes something that is concentrated in the hands of the wealthy because it's because it's so capital intensive. So see, and then if you have any kind of, so they end up having, in order to try to have any kind of tourism in a dangerous area, you have like bubbles. So there's one island in Haiti that's a tourist bubble. I read a review on TripAdvisor from like this March 2021, about what it was like to be there. And the beach sounded nice, the trees sounded nice, but the hotel itself had been basically abandoned. So it was like moldy sheets, door didn't close all the way, lots of mosquitoes, and it cost $333 Canadian a night. So that means it's an uphill battle. I don't see how people are going to be eager to go to that.
Well, especially since Canadians can't even leave their country right now.
Somehow they got there.
I mean, they're pretty locked down.
Yeah, that must have been just before they were like sober, and they got out, flapped their wings, and ended up in Haiti.
Yeah. Now it is interesting because I think what's going on right now, and I think a lot of people are starting to see some of this, but we've had a lot of the shutdowns, and a lot of the reasons the tourist industry is because of the supposed pandemic. And I will say supposed because there's a lot of proof that says there wasn't much of a pandemic at all. If you look at deaths in 2020, they were less than 2019, so much for pandemic. But one thing's real obvious, and that's that governments love control. The more control you give them, the happier they are. And you've got certain governments like Australia, New Zealand, they're saying they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure there's not one illness in the whole country, which is insane. So as a result, they're locking down like crazy. There goes the economy again. So they're destroying their own economy. We're at least mostly open now. I think in the States, I think we're basically open with some small pockets that are probably fighting it. But even in California, we're pretty much open. I don't think. Now, let me ask you, Susan, do you think at this point people will tolerate more lockdowns here?
Okay, I think that some people will want a mild lockdown because they don't really want to have traffic anymore. They want to be able to work from home,
Yeah.
and they
Yep.
it's like a mild one, yeah, okay, cool, that's good. And
Yep.
but like what we need to do is look at what's happening in India. India has had political issues, and so of course that's been exacerbated by responses to COVID, and they just eliminated their health ministers, et cetera. I think, well, fired. They didn't like,
Right.
exactly. But at any rate, what we're seeing is like repercussions here. So we think, oh, it doesn't matter. Think again. For example, yesterday I had annual maintenance for my heating and air conditioning, and the air conditioning, they go, well, you need a X number, pound and a half of Freon or whatever. It had gone up 300% in price. So
Jeez.
something that cost me like $80 was $210. And I said, well, why? Well, most of the Freon that's manufactured is manufactured either in China, and we have holdover tariffs from the Trump administration there, which were, well, they got politicized, so they're not good tariffs. And then India is locking down and not exporting anything because their production is so low. They're just using whatever they're using it for in country. So you have two massive supply issues, and then on top of that, even if they do manufacture it, it gets stuck in the port somewhere because there's a lack of containers and container ships.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring up the tariff thing. I've never been a fan of tariffs. I think they do nothing to help anybody other than certain people get rich. But beyond that, they don't help any economy whatsoever. They've never have. It's one of those things that people keep trying to do. And that's one thing I thought Trump was very incorrect in. It was I think that's the Argentine strategy. Tariffs, tons of tariffs. And, well, yeah, but so you buy a Toyota Corolla in Argentina, it costs you $50,000. Well, that's great. And so who benefits from it? The government, and that's it. The people don't. Nobody else does. It doesn't promote trade. It just promotes a government making more money out of the few rich that they have. So it's just really kind of idiotic to do tariffs. The funny thing is, have you seen those tariffs go away yet? No. We've gotten rid of everything Trump did except the tariffs. So it's just sort of like, okay, so who's benefiting from the tariffs?
Well, yesterday there was a pretty much general outcry against them because this is one thing Biden can do without too much political challenge. So I say, okay, instead of messing with the interest rate or money supply, just do something about tariffs.
Right.
And that will potentially have some anti-inflationary thing. Because, I mean, can you imagine Freon? I mean, they said they won't even give a quote for more than 7 days out. And chlorine for swimming pools you can't even get all the different kinds of chlorine.
But that's interesting because we are technically very low inflation. What are they saying? 1% inflation? Maybe it'll get to 1.5, which is utter insanity. I mean, anybody who's ever taken an economics class, I mean, this is just make believe. We're in La La Land at this point. You cannot have no inflation when you print trillions of dollars of money. You are buying from other people who control costs as much as they want to. And we're stuck in inflation right now. When you look at the costs in supermarket goods, they've gone up at least 20 to 40% in the last year. But there's no inflation. So what do we have? Spot inflation? Everything is going up except the government's view of inflation. Sorry, government, get real. We have inflation. I'd say we're probably somewhere between 40 and 50% inflation right now. What do you think?
I don't want to think about it or speculate because I think a lot of it's going to come back down. I think that some of the raw materials, not all of it will stay there's some elasticity downward, one would hope.
But how much of that is gamed, manipulated, or whatever else? Because we're claiming there is no inflation or very minor inflation. I mean, all the laws of economics say we have a lot of inflation. The fact that prices everywhere are high, we have supply chain issues. We don't see the supply chain issues as much in the big cities, or at least some cities, but you do see it in a lot of places. And as a result, supermarkets still have a lot of goods. Where we are, for example, the supermarkets are full. We don't really see a lot of emptiness. Maybe during July 4th we did, because people were buying hot dogs or buns or whatever they were buying. So you couldn't find everything you wanted. But other places, they're having shelves that are half empty. They can't get enough products.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially in a hardware store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said, getting gases. Now, how much of that is also gamed by the Chinese, who are trying to kind of impose their own system of trade and everything else? And it's not a balanced one. They never had a balanced system. They got coerced into balancing by the Trump administration, but now they're going back to the old, we rule, you drool, we don't care. It's interesting because that also has some inflationary tendencies towards us. They control, and this is the Apple method. Right before we issue a brand new machine, we tell everybody how great it is, but I'm sorry, you can't get one for another 4 months unless you order it now. Right, we need it, we need this. So they all go crazy, buy it, and then Apple manufactures slowly on purpose to create their own demand.
Well, and in the meantime, they deprecate the older versions and to deliberately slow down your so whatever you do, if you have an old iPhone, do not update. Don't allow the new system.
That's right. Yeah. And so that's the kind of stuff we go through. And by the way, I like Apple products. I think they're overpriced, and I don't like the things they pull, but I like working with them. You and I both have Apple, either laptops or desktops. Mm-hmm. They're good. They're good to work with. I don't mind it.
Yeah, definitely. I like your monitor too.
But the monitors are great. But there is a gaming aspect to what Apple does, which is, it's a little. I mean, people don't have to buy into it, but they do, and they get away with it. When you consider that an iPhone is probably made for pennies on a dollar in China, and then here they're sold for like $1,200, they're making a lot of profit.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. But the thing is there is competition. As much as they try to monopolize themselves, and there are unintended consequences. For example, I was just reading in Foreign Policy magazine today about the unintended consequences of the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa, where China is trying to, and they have been successfully trading and swapping infrastructure projects for access to resources. Yeah, and that they're not counting. They're completely overlooking the geographical proximity of India and the Indian Ocean, and the fact that India under British colonial rule, many Indians ended up in Africa, where they now control significant parts of certain countries' economies. Yeah, and so and they consider themselves an Indian diaspora, so they feel loyalty to India, not to China. And so India has been, the Prime Minister Modi has been going to Africa and strengthening all those relationships. And it's with like medicine and pharmaceuticals, on and on. Yeah.
And so it's an interesting world we live in right now, because I don't know if anybody's showing any good fiscal responsibility, any intelligence in the way money's being printed or anything else. It just seems to be let's keep going. Eventually we'll come to an end. Yeah, but is that really what we want? Not so sure. Not so sure. I've lived in 300% inflation. And that's a lot. And you get up in the morning and you go by and you see the jeans for $20 a pair of pants, and as you go home that same day, now they're 45, and you go, oh, geez, one day. And the next day it's 55 or 60. And
It's freon or chlorine.
yeah, and yeah, you can't get chlorine, you can't get freon, and uh, and so these are all issues that we're facing. It's hard to find chips right now for or silicon products. Harold, you were talking a little bit about that um, building computers. Like for example, if you build computers,
Well,
or
yeah.
if you're looking for high end computers, it's really hard right now to get the high end
CPUs are
CPUs.
difficult to get your hands on. GPUs, although a lot of the thing with GPUs have been quite expensive and difficult to find too. Although a lot of that is also because the whole cryptocurrency mining thing craze is still going on. So a lot of people are using GPUs for that as well.
NVIDIA, mainly.
NVIDIA. Yep.
Yeah, well, I've heard both, and for the CPUs, like AMD stuff has also been difficult to find.
Well,
Yeah.
I think so much for a smart city if they require chips.
Hmm. And everything requires sensors, and
Yeah.
sensors have to be run from computers which have chips.
And speaking of smart cities, it also kind of reminds me of some years back, Russia was trying to build a not quite a smart city, but like a smart like tech center district in Moscow called Skolkovo. And at the time, it seemed like it didn't go anywhere. It was being headed by their president Medvedev, who would kind of start stuff, and they didn't go anywhere. But apparently, it actually has grown somewhat. There's been a lot of funding by Intel, interestingly enough. Like one of the people. One of the big people involved in that was, I believe, one of the co-founders of Intel.
That's interesting. Years ago, when I was in St. Petersburg, I had a chance to visit the St. Petersburg Silicon Valley, and I was talking to them about they actually built a website for me and all sorts of things. But they had early language translation software that would actually go from speech to, and I'm sure it was from spyware, but it was speech to, and then change to translate it to another language. So, and it was a little duck, animated duck, and it's called Magic Goody. And Magic Goody, whack, 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 and then
Whack.
and then you say "Здравствуйте," and it say "Hello." It's like,
Interesting.
That is interesting.
yeah, that was years ago.
Well, look at what happened to Detroit. Detroit was originally built as the future city, perfectly urban designed, urban engineered. It was going to be the perfectly built city, and look at it. How long did that last? Not long. And it's just, so I don't know about these future cities, how good they are, how not. So far, the experiments haven't proven out too well.
Well, okay, we think we can see these as our eyes look at them in today's look. We either think they're really cool, and they have like glass bricks, and
Yep.
well, but think about, okay, two architectural tendencies, or three. Bauhaus in Germany, so that just now looks like blocky things to us, and then brutalism in England. And you can think of some of the movies that have, but they're just like the modernist look in brute. We think of brutal as being like brutality, but actually
Right.
brute just meant raw.
Yeah.
And then you have Le Corbusier in France, where he designed airports, and these are all these sleek, blocky things. And like now, from our eyes today, either they get postmodernized and we put a bunch of filigree in them, or we think, how hideous.
Right. Now, have you seen the new Beijing airport, which they said is quite a work of technology? It's one big spoke, and all the gates come out of one center area. But have you been there? Because I know you've flown there. I don't know if that was before or after it was built.
Yeah, I was in October 2019, and I think I was in the old airport.
Was that the old? It hadn't been finished yet.
Yeah, the old airport that was finished for the Olympics. So it wasn't that old.
Okay. And that was supposedly nice, but the new one is supposed to be quite impressive. Very, very.
Sure is.
They said very effective, very fast travel systems within it. transport systems to get people in and out of gates quickly.
That's pretty amazing.
Now, let me ask one last question before we take off. The U.S. used to be one of the world leaders in tech. We're not anymore, at least in architecture or anything else. We seem to be very far behind in infrastructure, in development of cities. When you look at what Dubai's doing, my gosh, those cities are incredible. Same with Qatar and other places. We're not doing that. Our cities are becoming total absolute dumps. What's happening? What do you think will happen to our cities? Are we ever going to do urban renewal? Are we going to fix them up? Are we going to invest in new technologies in cities? Or are we just going to travel to other places to see what humans can really do when they want to?
Well, I think in the case of, like, let's say New York City, during COVID, people fled and the theater district was closed. All those different stock exchange, all those places where offices where people would go, they couldn't go to them.
No.
And then people said, well, I'm not really that excited about commuting 3 hours a day. So they said, well, I want to see grass and things. So people who could afford to leave the left. People who could not afford to leave stayed. And then rents dropped, and you see like younger people coming back in before they have families, because when they have families, they'll leave.
Yeah.
But the thing is for now, that could be revitalizing, and it could be, the nature of the buildings and the nature of the businesses, I think we're going to see some big transformations.
It would be interesting.
The last couple of years, like in Houston, downtown core, they're trying to do all these lofts and things like that, even Oklahoma City. And it was exciting for people. And then it was super expensive. And so I think the people who were in that said, I'm not paying to just be in a couple of rooms. I'm going to sell and go buy something nice.
Well, wasn't that the trend of what they call the small home or something like that, little homes? And they're about 200 square feet, and that's your place. Live. You're in a closet. You're in a big closet.
They weren't like that so much in Oklahoma City or Houston. They're more high-rise or downtown and very urban living.
Right.
And so you're close to everything. Everything's cool, and you can get, like this, and everything's expensive. So you can get your $10 cappuccino. And then they said, no, I think I'm going to go across the river or just live, because they get high-speed internet and I can have 2 acres.
By the way, you were talking about things getting more expensive. I remember about a year and a half ago, if you went to an IHOP, it was about $22, $23 for 2 people. Now you're itching up towards about 50. And you go, wow.
Breakfast?
Yeah. 45, 50, over 40. And you just go, for IHOP? Everything's gotten a lot more expensive. A lot of restaurants are now a lot more than they used to be. So what used to be 20 to 25 is now probably 35 to 45 or 50. That's a lot of money. So on the one hand, people want to eat out, but the restaurants aren't as full as they used to be, because that's a lot more money for people that have already been hit economically. So it's an interesting thing going on in the rest. And I'm in California, so things are more expensive here, but still, that's a lot more expensive than it used to be.
Well, and I think it's a part of it is just restaurants that have survived realizing that they have to be a lot more resilient to fluctuations based on fluctuations in customers, rather than before, restaurants really tended to operate on really razor thin margins, and fluctuations like that would just kill them. And as we've seen, they have, so many restaurants have had to close down
but the high cost may cause the same effect. The high cost,
I mean, that's
because now you're limiting how many people can go by yourself. And yet that's what it's costing them to get product in now, quite a bit more. So
it's just so amazing though, because I was going to Arby's in the drive-thru and it said, but sign-on bonus, $500 for if you want to be in.
I know, isn't that amazing? And that's the government's fault for giving people a ton of money to stay home. But I know people who are making almost $4,000 a month just staying home doing nothing from the government, unemployment. You go, Jeez. And then
Well,
they're making more than they used to make actually at work. So as a result, why go to work? And that's kind of one of the bad problems also with what went on. I always find it funny that we have all these forced lockdowns, and then they give you $2,000 to go here. That doesn't it make up for it? And people are going, I just lost 60 grand. I lost 80 grand in salary. No, it doesn't. It's sort of a joke. But anyway, that's kind of what's been going on.
I think there's just so much asymmetry in the labor market. I mean, I have a friend who's in Reno, Nevada,
Yeah.
and he's been complaining that he lost his job, and he was doing basically managing a collection center for some dentists, some dentist co-op. And so I go, and he goes, I'll just do anything. So I thought, okay, Home Depot is just begging for different types of workers. So I just thought, out of curiosity, how many jobs do they have listed in just Reno? And I saw over 50 jobs listed in just Reno. And some of them were cashiers, and I noticed a lot of things in kitchen and bath, designer things,
Yeah.
but then also a lot in security and surveillance and shrinkage stuff. I mean, in his personality, he'd be good at that.
Yeah. We never checked. Was anybody in the chat room or any questions?
I haven't got any questions here in the chat room.
Okay. Well, anyway, we are pretty much out of time right now. It goes fast.
It does.
So music's coming on. Anyway, we hope you folks enjoyed it. If you like it, give us a thumbs up or subscribe. That would be, if you're on YouTube, subscribe. YouTube just doesn't move very far. Anywhere else, we're on Facebook and LinkedIn. Please subscribe and give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have any ideas or things you'd like us to talk about, let us know and we'll cover them. Have a good one, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. This has been a short week for everybody, and now you can have a shorter weekend before you know it. It'll be here. Take care, and we will see you folks next week on eBizChat. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.